gambling casinos to the sugar industry, sugar mills, the field, the land, the telephone, electrical, and so on. That's after a very reasonable proposal to reimburse the American companies on the basis of the purchase of bonds, which was an offer which was rejected. The Cuban people have had to withstand not only an embargo, but a blockade. That is, not only will the United States refuse to trade with Cuba or invest, but it prevents other countries from trading and investing. Since Cuba, in its neo-colonial status, was utterly dependent on the U.S. economy, particularly its sugar industry, which was the backbone of the Cuban economy. And finally, the financial crisis that was caused by the Wall Street operations, speculation, and all that, again, sending many third world countries into a tailspin, very, very profoundly, has affected Cuba. Cuba is a poor country. We have to ask ourselves, what do we mean by poverty? There's a relative poverty and an absolute poverty. There's a poverty which means that you cannot afford 3 square meals a day or even 2. There's a poverty which is relative, which is that while you may be able to survive, there are people in the same area, the same country, that is raking billions, is basically getting the lion's share of the wealth of the country. It is true, and the U.S. and its Western allies are always quick to point this out, that the average salary in Cuba is about $25 a month. This is supposed to discredit socialism. It's supposed to show that socialism is a failure. What they leave out is that all of the fundamental needs of the Cuban people are taken care of, free of charge. 1, health care. There is no charge for your medical care, whether it be doctor visits, hospital care, surgery. 2, there is absolutely no charge for education on any level, including universities. It's a radical one that we propose as part of our program. It's actually very modest. Fact is, a lot of poor people can't attend universities, even if the tuition is free. They still have to support themselves. In Cuba, the students get stipends. All of their needs are taken care of. Finally, housing. The Cuban people buy their own homes, and the government lets them pay it down on time. And no one pays more than 10%, frequently it's much less than 10% of their income on housing. So if $25 a month, for example, is the average salary, that means you're not paying more than $2.50 rent, virtually rent-free. Now, we did have an interview with a black school teacher who retired, and she voiced sentiments which were fairly common throughout the island. The Cuban people are dissatisfied with their standard of living. She voiced it in this way, that she'd been teaching all her life, 20, 30 years, and had now nothing to show for it upon retirement. In Havana, the choice is, in terms of maintaining your house, often between paying for the repair of the apartment and paying for some important, desperately needed goods to come out of the small check. This is a reality. Unfortunately, in my view, the Cuban people, many of them, have come to take for granted the fact that the society is now taking care of all their fundamental needs. But I think it may be a product of human nature. You get used to something, you come to expect it, and you want more. So, the number one concern in Cuban society is the low salary, the need to raise wages. Politically, they are also rising rapidly. They are moving toward 50% of the responsible leadership positions. However, machismo is still alive and well, domestically, in terms of the house, the home. Of course, women still bear the burden of household duties, the primary burden, not the entire burden. Men are beginning to assume more responsibility. The biggest problem is the double standard, the sexual double standard, where Cuban men seem to feel entitled to carry on in sexual relationships with women outside the home, married men, talking about. And Cuban women so far have been willing to put up with this. I believe, though, as society continues to evolve, that situation will dramatically change. The question of the subject of Afro-Cubans is subject to a great deal of misinterpretation. For one thing, our definition of what a black person is differs in Cuba and the United States. If we use the American definition, 85% of Cuba is of African descent, is black. What we perceived was an easy mingling of all peoples without distinction. However, there is a residue of the kind of racism that some are familiar with in Latin America, where you want to avoid, if you are of European descent, your daughter marrying a black Cuban. But that's something that is, as I say, a residue, something left over from the past. I thought that the Afro-Cuban, or the African-based religions in Cuba was kind of a fringe religion. Santeria, Yoruba-based religion. I have found that it is the dominant religion in Cuba. And it is almost universal among black Cubans. And even non-black Cubans, what they call mulattoes and so on, are engaged in that religion.